Describe a current or a challenging project that you're working on or have worked on in the past. So what is the interviewer looking for in this one? Basically, they want to understand, like, did you get picked to work on interesting projects, which is a very big one. Like if you're one of those people who you're just like, okay at your job, like they're not going to pick you to work on something special. Again, I'm a basketball guy, and it's, the still got Kobe on the brain. But if you're on any sports team or basketball, for example, most of the top athletes look forward to being on the all-star team, and the all-star team is meaning like you're the best of the best, and that's pretty much what like a lot of these companies do. Like if you're like the best of the best, they're going to pick you like, hey, come work on this special project that nobody else is working on except for other people from other teams that are extremely exceptional. But think about it as like National Honor Society for those, if you're trying to frame it high school wise. That's kind of how they look at it. So if you're doing your job exceptionally well, you're going to work on side projects. If you're just okay at your job and not really performing, they want you to stay where you are and try to get better. But that's really what they're looking at in that perspective. So I just want to make sure you're good on that. Another thing that they're really looking at is, was your work reasonably challenging? That's something that really gets a lot of people in trouble. Like I've seen had an IT support engineer that I was working on, and they asked him, something kind of similar. And as he was describing, what was challenging to him, he was really just describing a normal day in his role at the company. So as you're kind of thinking about it, ask yourself, are you kind of raising a red flag? If you're talking about, the project was challenging because of the volume or the speed, and you're not comfortable working with that speed or that volume, and that's the speed and volume that everybody's working at this company, they might rule you out or say, hey, I have concerns that this person might not make it or might have some struggles adjusting to how we do things at a Faang level. So just really kind of keep those things in mind. Again, as we think about challenging, we want it to be one of those things that has multiple layers. Like, yes, it needs to be technically challenging, but we need to have multiple stakeholders and a lot at risk here. Like there needs to be, like, again, those tough deadlines, a lot of eyes on it, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of key players being involved, and you have to get input. There's that conflict resolution that kind of goes into it as well. Like those are the things that are going to be exciting and that are really going to like set you over the top. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then, of course, the big question, were you successful in all of that? And if you weren't successful, really kind of talk about, what were some of the lessons that you learned from it? What were some of the takeaways? What would you like to have done differently? And as you kind of answer those questions, you really want to talk about you being the driver of it. So don't point fingers in those situations. Well, it would have been better if, Steve would have did his part. Well, no, that's not the case. Hey, I could have taken time out to check in on some of my other team members to make sure they weren't having any struggles, to make sure that they were doing everything that they could possibly do. That's more the response. They don't want you pointing fingers. So really just being the owner and being a key driver of successes, that's going to be really big. And then again, talking about what you can do to learn from those failures. So with conflict resolution, we really recommend kind of focusing more so like on disagreements from like design decisions or process decisions with your coworkers, managers, or team members. That really goes a lot further than, kind of going more of like the emotional route. Like I've seen conflict resolution examples of, someone having an issue with one of their coworkers taking their feet off in the work area, and the whole area would smell like feet. And they had like to confront the guy. Like those aren't the examples that they want. And also you really want to rethink how you think about conflict. So a conflict doesn't necessarily mean like, you get into a fist fight with somebody in the parking lot, over them like stealing your sandwiches every day. Like that's not what we're talking about. Like, again, if you can keep those conflicts more so rooted in like technical things, like the more day-to-day types of scenarios, like the decision designs, process designs, even project design. Like let's say if you have a manager that wants to take a project off the table, but you see the value in that project and you want to fight for this project, like, hey, I think we really need to keep this going. Like we're close to finishing this, and this could really open doors. It could be a really cool project for us in the future, or a product for us in the future. Those are the types of big examples that they're looking for. Or like if you're having issues in terms of hiring and you don't have like budget approval, like, and you're trying to, ease things for your team and kind of distribute the work evenly, and you're already a manager, like how do you go to your superior and try to fight for more resources to get more people, or maybe kind of allocate some of the work that you have to other team members to kind of balance your team out and keep from losing folks. So there's a lot of different ways to really tackle conflict. Don't just think about it as, again, a fist fight in a parking lot. It doesn't have to be that. Um, so again, what they're looking for on that is like, can you handle disagreements? That's going to be a really big one. Like, in order to be successful, like you really have to know how to have like those crucial conversations. They even have classes for those at the Faang companies. Like I learned almost everything I know in terms of like crucial conversation from being at Facebook, from being at Amazon, and doing that coursework. But just being able to handle disagreement, not just kind of folding under the pressure, or because like a lot of times what happens, like if people can't handle disagreements, they either blow up, they quit the company, they force other people to leave, or it becomes more of an HR issue. So just kind of keeping that in mind, which kind of goes into the red flags. You know, like one thing that people don't really do a good job of is like disclosing the outcome of the conflict. You always want to make sure that you close the conflict out. So let us know like how the conflict was resolved, because like if you don't tell us how if you don't tell us how it was resolved and the outcome of it, we're going to take it as like it's a bad example. You're not really fixing this issue, is just a lingering issue. And then you kind of open things up for the worst. Like, did you get into a fight in the parking lot? Did you get arrested? This become an HR issue. Are you banned from this company? Did you burn any bridges? You know, those are going to start becoming a thing. So if you don't address it, the interviewer is going to have a lot of room to think the plan for the worst, or just kind of let their imaginations run wild. And you don't want that to be the case. So as you're talking about the conflict that you dealt with, talk about the outcome of it, talk about the resolution, how it was resolved, and how you were able to move forward. Also, you want to make sure that you discuss the method of handling this disagreement. Again, it's not always the what. Sometimes it's the why, and sometimes it's the hows. So in terms of a how of a situation, like if you have an issue, like is this something that you should handle over email? Is this something that we handle over a Slack thread? Do we set up a meeting over Zoom to kind of talk about this? Do we bring in a hiring manager? Do we need to bring in HR? Do we need to bring in a mediator? Really walk us through the method of how you handle the situation and what went into it. Like, what was your thought process in taking that approach? One thing that I will always say that never works is trying to handle conflict through email. Email is always like the worst way. Like if there's an issue, like nowadays, pick up a phone, schedule a Zoom call, send a Slack message. Hey, can we hop on a quick call real quick? I just want to, make sure we're buttoned up. So just really think about that process as well. On the flip side, like if you have no conflict to discuss, they're going to take it as you're not important enough. You're just kind of like a fly on the wall. You're not really having like the type of impact that you could have. You're not maximizing your opportunity, because like if you're doing everything at the highest level in your role, like you are going to butt heads. You are going to have those issues. There are going to be some decisions that you don't necessarily agree with, versus like on the flip side, like you're just kind of going with the flow, and those people don't really make an impact. Like they're not remembered, and that's not what you want. Like you want to be memorable. You want to, have impact wherever you are, and those things go a long way. And on the flip side of that, you don't want to be the person that's always having conflicts, because if you're always having conflicts, that's going to mean that you're too hard to manage. And if they're spending all that time in terms of like dealing with your conflicts, that means other people being neglected and they're not getting what they need. So that you're really hindering the process, and not just hurting yourself, but you're hurting the whole team and those around you. Any questions around conflict resolution? Cool. So don't go sharing your Fight Club stories when you think about conflict resolution. And then the last point here is it pops up out of space, but you don't want to be too focused on emotions or the other person in the conflict. And that kind of goes back to those examples that I was talking about, where it's more so rooted in issues such as, I don't like how this person is dressed. I don't like this person taking their shoes off in the office, things like that. And you also don't want to antagonize the person too much as you're kind of talking through the conflict, because the way to think about it in a lot of those cases, well, what if we have a conflict and you're going to go into another company that you're interviewing and you're kind of putting me in this light? People kind of think about it from that perspective. So don't get too caught up in the other person. Really kind of focus more so like on the situation, like just kind of being as objective as possible, and then just kind of give your input and your insight. And that's going to be a better way to frame it, as opposed to like just pointing the finger like, hey, them, as opposed to the other way around, like really taking that ownership. It shows like a lack of accountability in a lot of ways. Oh, weaknesses. This one is, what would you say is your biggest weakness? So this one is a really interesting one. Keep in mind, like your real weaknesses might be misinterpreted. One thing that I would say, a place that really shifted my thought process around like strengths and weaknesses was Facebook. So when you're interviewing Facebook, really keep this in mind. So Facebook's philosophy on strengths and weaknesses is this. A strength is something that it's not necessarily something that you're always good at. It's something that you're more so excited about. So it's going to be the thing like you might be okay at it, but whenever you know that you have to do it, you get excited about it. A weakness is going to be more so something that takes away from you. So it could be something that you're actually really good at, but you hate having to do it. So that's really kind of how they look at it. So case in point, like, hey, you know, I'm a good cook, but I absolutely hate having to go to the grocery store and pick up everything and cook. So in hindsight, it's not really a strength of mine; it's a weakness. So really kind of think about it from that perspective. But that's kind of like the philosophy that a lot of other companies kind of adopted, but Facebook really kind of put that out there. So thinking about it from that perspective really helps out. But as you're kind of going through, talking through your weaknesses, you really want to try to like leave it neutral as you kind of respond to it. Like you don't want to like laugh the situation off. I've seen a lot of people do that, like weaknesses. Like I don't really have any weaknesses or something like that. You really want to avoid doing that. You really want to try to make it more of a universal thing by prefacing your statement with, well, everyone has weaknesses. My biggest area area of opportunity for my growth is in this area. I've done blah, blah, blah. So breaking it down from that perspective kind of humanizes it a little bit more. And it doesn't like take away from who you are. It doesn't take away from your chances whenever you set it up the right way. Now, another thing that you don't want to do, you don't want to take the Michael Scott approach, as I call it, for those who are familiar with The Office, where you go in saying like, I work too hard, I care too much, and, things like that. Those are not the responses that they're looking for. That'll get you laughed out of the room. They'll take that as again, you don't have that self-awareness. And, a lot of the great contributors and people who've had, positive impact in the world, not just in companies, they've always had a self-awareness that's a key element in terms of successful people. And you also really want to find like sometimes something benign to say if you can, like to kind of help out. Again, everyone has, weaknesses or, that's a good one. It's kind of hard to find, but, have this thing. So saying it's hard to find, means like, okay, like let me think on it a little bit, but I've buttoned a couple of things up along the way so I don't have as many weaknesses. So let me be a little bit more introspective to think about an area of opportunity for improvement in a certain area. You also want to try to spin it into something technical, for example, or like something from the past. So technically, like let's say you're interviewing for like a full stack software engineer, but it really leans more and really with like Faangs and stuff like that, they really lean more on like object-oriented programming languages. So really more like the Java, C# of the world, things like that. So let's say you're interviewing for a role that focuses on that piece. You can mention like, hey, I would like to be a little bit stronger on the UI side. Like, of course, I know how to do it and how it all ties in, but it is something that I wouldn't mind being stronger in. I think it'll make me help me become a better developer and allow me to think outside of the box a little bit more on the back end. So maybe something of that nature, or, get something from the past. So you can say, for example, I wasn't a good public speaker. I became aware of that and I'm working on it, XYZ, like I'm doing Toastmasters. I'm seeing a speech therapist or, a speech coach, things of that nature. So just kind of anything to show that you're working towards being better. That's really what they're looking for in terms of like those weaknesses. And if you check out this link, it'll kind of give you a list of some of the other areas of weakness that people normally throw out there.